Have you ever seen those cartoons where the character has a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other, and both the devil and angel are talking to the character, trying to convince the character on what to do? It turns out that that isn't far from real life. So what the devil and the angel represent is two different states of consciousness. So we're all just conscious beings. You aren't your thoughts, you aren't your feelings. You're the conscious awareness that can take a step back and observe your thoughts and feelings. And so what you truly are at the fundamental level is you are that conscious awareness. So there are different levels of consciousness that you can operate in. And this is Dr. David Hawkins' scale of consciousness. He calibrated this scale using kinesiology muscle testing. And so these are all the different levels of consciousness that you can be operating in. Now, all the ones in red, these are all the negative low frequencies. And the ones in green are all the higher, more positive frequencies that you can be operating in. And so think of the devil as a low state of consciousness, or the ego, because it's the ego that keeps you in the negative low frequencies. And so again, think of the devil as the lower state of consciousness. So the ego is where all your negative fear-based thoughts come from. The ego is really selfish. It's me, and my needs. The ego is reactive. It's fear-based. It's focused on personal gain. So me. It has doubts and insecurities, and it can be discouraging. And the angel represents your higher self. So we all have an ego and we all have a higher self. The higher self is linked to your soul. So you have the ego and the soul, and your higher self is basically like you, but that's operating in a higher state of consciousness, operating in these higher frequencies. And so the higher self is calm. It communicates to you in the form of intuition and inner wisdom. It's aligned with your truth. It makes decisions from clarity. And so these are two obvious different states of consciousness that you can operate in. And what will level your life up so that you can get out of negativity and survival and feeling stuck is learning to get more in tune with your higher self, so that you're able to channel this positive wisdom and clarity and guidance that can help you on your life's journey. And so this is something that you need to put into practice, right? And so firstly, the ego, I don't want you to give the ego a negative meaning, because a lot of people will say things like, the ego's not your amigo. And we don't want to give the ego a negative meaning, because it's important to have an ego for the human experience. The ego is your identity, it's your sense of self, your likes, your dislikes, your hobbies, it's who you are. And because our true self is the soul, all our souls are connected as one. So in order to come here and have the human experience, we need the ego, because it creates the illusion of separation. So don't give the ego a negative meaning, even though it's the ego that, creates all the negative fear-based thinking and keeps you in these negative low frequencies. It's understanding that it's important, but it's becoming aware of your own ego so that you're not identifying with it and operating from being reactive, and the ego likes to control. So if you're operating from the ego, you tend to try to control everything going on in your life, or you're very reactive, and it creates a lot of negativity. Whereas when you learn to move out of the ego and more into the soul, which is your heart, and get more in tune with your higher self, that is when you won't be experiencing all that negative fear-based thoughts. You'll just have positive wisdom and clarity coming through. And I was connecting to my higher self before I even knew about the higher self. So for example, I would have something on my mind that I'm puzzled about. You know, I have this like negative perspective on it. And then out of nowhere, this positive perspective would come into my mind, where it was like I was able to look at the situation completely differently with this positive perspective. And it was just so weird that this was happening because I didn't know what it was. And then later on, I learned about the higher self, and I was like, oh, that's what was happening. It was my higher self that was bringing me that positive perspective. So it's really helpful to get like tuned in with your higher self. Now, I wrote here a truck analogy because the key to getting more connected to your higher self and more tuned in is moving out of ego, which means to move out of your ego mind and into your heart. The ego is very loud. So it's like you can't really hear your higher self or the intuition or the inner wisdom coming through if your ego is being very loud and chatty. Because the higher self and the intuition is more like quiet whispers, right? So it's about getting that ego to quieten down so it's not so loud, and then that's when the spiritual guidance from your higher self can come through. So think of, I'm going to use this truck analogy I thought of. So think of like a truck that's going down a highway at like 100 miles an hour. Think of that as the ego. Like the ego is very rush, 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 impatient. You know, it causes all that chatter in your mind, all those racing thoughts. And the key to move out of ego and get more connected to your higher self is slowing down, like slowing your mind down, slowing your nervous system down. So think of the truck coming up to an intersection. It's got to brake. It's got to slow right down for that intersection. That's the idea, is your ego is the truck that's going 100 miles an hour, very rush, 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 chatter, chatter, chatter. Slow the mind down, like a truck slowing down for an intersection, slow the nervous system down. And then you start quieting the mind. And then that's when the higher self can come through. So it's like, okay, how do I slow my system down? How do I slow the mind and the nervous system down so that the higher self can come through? Think like basically the tool for this is deep breathing, deep conscious breathing. So think of breathing or your breath as the brake. So you got to put the brake on in the truck to slow that truck down. So in order to slow yourself down, you just start doing deep belly breaths and you just focus on your breath. And that ends up slowing your mind down, slowing the nervous system down. And then you can get more connected into the body and the heart. And again, that's when you can start receiving this guidance coming through to guide you. And a couple of other tips is meditation's really great for this, for quieting the ego down, because in meditation, the idea is to get your brainwaves to drop, and as your brainwaves start dropping, you drop from ego to the heart. And when you're in meditation, like your ego will just completely shut off. All that chatter just stops. And you're in your heart and you become pure consciousness, pure awareness. You become your true self, the soul. And it's a really amazing feeling. Like when you first experience that feeling of being out of the ego and just pure consciousness, you can get into this feeling of bliss and euphoria. It feels amazing. So it's a really cool thing to practice. But another cool way of just getting out of the ego and getting more tuned into your higher self and soul is by going for a walk in nature. Because nature is very grounding. It grounds you in the body, but it also brings you into the present moment. And when you're in the present moment, that dissolves the ego. The ego falls away. And like nature is spirit. Spirit is nature. So by going out in nature, you're amongst spirit. It has this calming energy that like kind of rubs off onto you, calms you down, and again brings you into the present moment. And so I've gone for walks in nature with a problem on my mind, and I'll just be thinking about it in my mind, And I'll be talking to my higher self, like asking for help and guidance and assistance. And then as I'm going for a walk, I'll just start receiving that guidance and assistance coming through from my higher self that's, just helping me with the problem that's on my mind. And you can even, like, as crazy as it sounds, you can have a conversation with it and go like back and forth. Like, I don't do it out loud. Like if I'm in public, I'm not talking out loud. I'm just talking in my mind. But your higher self will respond and talk back. So you can have an ongoing conversation with it. So now I'm going to share 4 signs that you're getting a download from your higher self. Sign number 1, the idea fills you with excitement, passion, joy, and optimism. It makes you feel really good and fired up. That's how you know it's from your higher self. Because remember, everything from the ego is just negative and fear-based. So your higher self will never make you feel negative or fear. Number 2, the idea resonates. Your body says yes to it. So this is something that you just feel in your body because your soul's more connected to the body and your higher self's more connected to the body and heart. So it's like you just feel it in your body and it just resonates. Number 3, you have a knowing that this is part of your destiny. And again, that's something you feel in the body. You just have this strong knowing in the body. And there's no doubt. Number 4, the idea came to you spontaneously, no effort, thinking, or strain required. So an example of this that just happened to me the other day was I was wanting to, I'm creating a 6-month coaching program and I was trying to think of what's a good name? I didn't want to give it any name. I wanted it to be like a name that, people hear, they know what it's about, like what the program's for and how it helps the person. And I was stuck for months, trying to figure this name out. And then just the other day, I was in this positive state and I thought, oh, see if I can think up a name. And then out of nowhere, I got the name of my program, I got my method name, I got a slogan, I got a brand name, I got my own signature framework. All of this stuff just went boom, 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 clicked into place within 24 hours with no effort, thinking, or strain required. It just came to me. It was almost like I didn't just create a program name, I ended up creating a whole brand. And it was like I just stumbled into it without trying. So that's an example of a download from my higher self. I also put IBS SIBO here because I wanted to share another personal example of intuition and inner wisdom and guidance. So 18 years ago, I developed gut issues and went to the doctors about it. And I was diagnosed as having IBS. And I intuitively knew that was bullshit. I was like, that's a bullshit label. That's not a real diagnosis because IBS stands for irritable bowel syndrome. All it's saying is, oh, you have an irritable bowel. And then they're like, bye. And I'm like, nah, that's bullshit. I was like, I knew what caused my gut issues. So I always held the belief that this can be reversed. I knew that this was fixable. So I rejected the idea of having IBS. I did not accept that label because I just knew, I had this feeling in my body that's not right. So feelings is another form of communication from, your higher self and soul and intuition. And then I decided to play my own doctor on and off for the last 18 years whilst having these chronic gut issues. And I trialed out, different diets and different things. And then I ended up asking, I tried a diet that kind of helped me learn my symptoms better. And then once I learned my symptoms, I ended up somehow stumbling across SIBO. And I realized my symptoms matched SIBO. And I was like, I reckon this is what it is. It was like that feeling and knowing in my body, I reckon it's SIBO. And I went to the GP, asked about getting a SIBO test done because you can get tested for it. And the GP was like, oh, don't worry about testing, and gave me the treatment. And it was a 6-week treatment and it didn't work. And I thought, okay, maybe it's not SIBO, even though I still had this strong feeling it's SIBO. And then I decided this year to try gut healing. And then after a few weeks of that, it wasn't working. And my intuition, that feeling in my body, keeps saying to me, go for a SIBO test. It's SIBO. So I booked in the SIBO test back in June and tested positive for both SIBO and IMO, which is, IMO is kind of like part of the SIBO family, just another type of gut issue. So I tested positive for both of those things. Turns out it wasn't IBS, so my intuition was right from the get-go 18 years ago. And then I just recently went through treatment for SIBO and IMO, and now, after 18 years of chronic gut issues, my symptoms are gone. It's resolved. And that's because of my intuition and that feeling I had in my body the whole time. I just had that feeling, this is SIBO, or this isn't IBS. So that's another form of intuition, or, you know, your higher self speaking to you. So I hope you got some sort of value out of this video and it helps you have a bit more clarity to be able to differentiate between your higher self and ego. And remember that this is a practice. So the more you practice differentiating the two and getting more tuned in with your higher self, the easier it gets. And the more your higher self sends you messages and you respond to those messages, then that's telling your higher self that you're receiving, you're listening, so the higher self's going to keep throwing more messages at you. So responding is like to the signs or the messages is also you communicating back to your higher self. And that's going to strengthen your relationship with it. So I hope you like the video. Smash the like button if you got value. Write a comment. If you like this sort of content, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell notification. And if you want to learn more about differentiating ego from the higher self, I'll link another follow-up video here so you can learn more. Have an awesome day. Peace.